All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Berg. I am with Kasten, K10, and I run our technical alliances here at Kasten. We've got a key partner with us today, Mr. Chris Rosen from IBM Cloud. Thank you, Chris, for being with us today. IBM has been a major partner, with Veeam for years, and we're happy to start extending that partnership into Kasten with Kubernetes native data protection on IBM Cloud. We're talking about OpenShift today with Chris, and without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to Mr. Chris Rosen. Chris, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Adam. And thank you to you fine gentlemen for making the first trip out to a face-to-face event. I know I was really excited about it. And after KubeCon Europe, and we had a recap talking about, the plan being face-to-face, I was packing my bag immediately. So what I want to do is kind of talk through a scenario where this is common for my customers. I'm a product manager in IBM Cloud. I own kind of everything containers and microservices related in the cloud. So kind of, the plan for the agenda, we'll go through a quick use case. Anytime I talk to customers, it's always grounded in a use case. Like, I love technology, but if we're just building widgets to build widgets, it may or may not solve problems. So we really want to focus on solving those problems. So we'll start with that use case. Then we'll do a quick kind of walkthrough of Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud and kind of go through the scenario that a lot of my customers face where, yes, they get started, they deploy their first cluster, running workloads, but then the reality starts to set in around challenges with backup, DR, they break something, and they're maybe not quite as cloud native as they would have hoped. And fast forward, spoiler alert, our partnership with Kasten and Veeam solves that critical gap. And yes, the mask is very challenging to talk with. So this use case, at the crux of it, it really comes down to innovation, where everyone is developing software in some form or fashion, and they need to be able to do so not only quickly, but also securely. So when we think about it in that context of being able to push the limits and fail fast, but yet recover just as quickly, that's the real challenge in the use case. And there's a lot of offerings that we would kind of try and position in that space, but fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. I deploy an OpenShift cluster, I run some workload, someone breaks something, how do we get back to that good state? Whether it's a dev test cluster or a production workload, the reality is we need to get back to a safe space. So Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud, if you didn't know, IBM has a cloud. We've got a lot of services there that are unique and differentiated. In kind of the PaaS portfolio, we've got Managed OpenShift, we'll call that for short, and you'll see through the walkthrough where we're very focused on simplifying cluster creation, moving up that line of responsibility so our customers can focus on what's important to them, because it's not running OpenShift clusters. It's building cloud native applications. It's modernizing the traditional existing fleet. So we do that by running clusters where we want them, building in kind of some of these characteristics. OpenShift is OpenShift. And IBM acquired OpenShift because it is that foundational platform that runs consistently on any infrastructure. It's going to give you that same look, feel, capabilities. So then the challenge from the IBM Cloud perspective is, how do I make OpenShift unique here? So it's around building in and improving those operational characteristics that allow us to provide a 99.99% SLA, to put additional security and controls around it. Things like every cloud provider has a key management system that basically they have a policy assurance that they're not going to access your apps or your data. Only in IBM Cloud, with our crypto services, with what we call keep your own key, is there a technical assurance that we don't have access to your applications or your data. So think about this secure enclave around all of your apps that IBM developers, our support, our SREs do not have access to that data. So let's kind of walk through the scenario of what a general customer journey looks like and how they get started. So the first thing, I come to the IBM Cloud dashboard and I look on the catalog. I search for containers. I see things if I want a Kubernetes cluster or do I want an OpenShift cluster. Once I select that, now we've got a couple things. We can do it manually and set up that cluster, which we'll walk through here. Or we also have this more of an opinionated cluster deployment, where if you want this secure by default, where it's air-gapped, we're integrating with monitoring, logging, activity tracker, key management, all out of the box. But for this example, we'll just do the manual deployment. We pick our OpenShift version. We support the extended support just like Red Hat, so 4.6 will get you to 4.10. This example, we're using 4.7. So then I choose the infrastructure that I want to run in, virtual private cloud, IBM Cloud Satellite. So this is where we're extending fully managed services outside of the confines of infrastructure that IBM owns. Maybe you want to manage OpenShift cluster in your data center, in the edge, in your retail store, maybe even another public cloud provider like AWS, Amazon, or yeah, that's one and the same, Azure or Google. We can provide managed services in that infrastructure. So that way your OpenShift cluster is in proximity to other resources that you may have deployed. Here with the multi-zone cluster, where again, that's how we get that 99.99% SLA, is distributing masters and workers across 3 physically separate data centers. Again, raising the line of responsibility so you focus on those apps. So then we pick the flavor, which is kind of our t-shirt size. How much resource do you want? And you can swing and miss, have too much, have too little, and then deploy additional worker pools to kind of right size what you need, even including bare metal nodes if you need that as a part of the managed service. I could change the name. By default, we're using Lux encryption on the container disk, private or public endpoints. So this comes down to, again, do I want front-side network connectivity or not? And then lastly, do I actually have the right permissions to deploy this thing? So maybe I invited you to my account and I'm not a good administrator, so I gave you the wrong permissions. We'll let you know right out of the box. Here's, kind of a look. If I want to go in and change the flavors, I can go in and do that, again, including bare metal. So now, again, in our story, think about innovation. Someone has created this cluster for me. We have it up and running. Here's my kind of overview of all the clusters that I have running in my account. When I go into a specific cluster, now I get additional details. Right across the top, we're going to give you all of the health around that cluster. It's all green, so I'm happy. If something were broken, it'd be red, and it'd be glaring immediately, or send you an alert when those things happen. But here you can see all the pertinent information around the cluster and its contents, including down here at the bottom, these integrations. So this is where, again, OpenShift becomes more than OpenShift, where you could run EFK or Prometheus in your cluster, but the reality is no one wants to do that. Let's move up that line of responsibility and use a managed monitoring and logging solution. In context, I can launch out to my logging, in this example, or my monitoring service and dig into that particular cluster. Now, you think logs, that's not very, that's kind of ugly, but I can use my natural language to search for a particular time frame and say, well, there's an error about 5 hours ago, and it'll take me in context of that line. And I'm not a developer, I can't solve the problem, but I can give that to the right squad and have them solve it. So now when I deploy workloads, so now cluster's running, I'm a developer, I'm a team, I'm starting to deploy content. So in this example, I grabbed one of our cloud packs. This is about IBM software really modernizing to a cloud native approach. I can deploy that to my existing cluster. Yep, I want to deploy this particular cloud pack. And so now at this point in the journey, I have my cluster deployed. I've got my very critical cloud pack for business applications up and running. I've got this pristine environment that I want to keep safe. fast forward, I'm not going to give you the whole K10 rundown because if you've been here at the booth at all today, you've already heard this. But this is, again, the foundation to our partnership with Kasten by Veeam is to bring these capabilities into IBM Cloud. So as you're running the Kubernetes or OpenShift clusters and that critical workload, including Cloud Pak for business automation in this example, I can deploy it and have that resiliency either built into my CI/CD pipeline or once that workload is up and operational. You can see here that we have a tile in the catalog, that same catalog where I deployed my OpenShift cluster. I could come in, search for Kasten, and I can see the tile here where I'm going to come in and deploy that instance into that particular cluster. So the same kind of look and feel that I just talked through with deploying the IBM content, we can deploy Kasten into that cluster as well. Where do I actually want to deploy it? And then after that, it's the same look and feel. So when we think about consistent user experience, maybe you're using Kasten in another cloud or on-prem today, we're not going to make Kasten something that it's not. It's going to give you the same features and capabilities in IBM Cloud that you can get everywhere else. So when you choose to run Kasten on top of your Kubernetes or OpenShift cluster in IBM Cloud, again, it's that same feature set, the same ability to either back up or have the disaster recovery, or again, integrate that to my DevOps pipeline. And then the last one here is around, again, expanding on that integration where it's the same Kasten K10 capabilities, but now we're just using that in a different source, a different managed from type cluster. I'd like to thank you for your time. If you have questions for me on the IBM Cloud side, my email and my Twitter are here.